though you have dollars, they fall like rain. Still want drive in another man lane. You don't need no gimme for to make the lyrics public. You don't need no fire pan, no stick, make it get ball like a weight. Gonna jump up in the air, some white beware. We fling bout the lyrics like fear. You don't need no gimme for to make the lyrics public. You don't need no fire pan, no stick, make it ball like a weight. Gonna jump up in the air, some white beware. We fling bout the lyrics like fear. Easy squeeze, make no riot. So they make noise easy. See why alongside Wavy and my boy, White Sea. We don't need no gimme for to make the lyrics public. We don't need no fire pan, no stick, make it get ball like a weight. Gonna jump up in the air, some white beware. We fling bout the lyrics like fear. We don't need no gimme for to make the lyrics public. We don't need no fire pan, no stick, make it ball like a weight. Gonna jump up in the air, some white beware. We fling bout the lyrics like fear. Music down noise, gun and a toy. Some boy me telling us you no must realize whole road done change. No watch me like the words out of my mouth is change. Some your lyrics that I forget rearrange. You don't need no money to get that. Hot than pepper when you sing.
What, Mr. Joe?
Yeah, right.
All right.
All right, I'll be back there.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Cowie.
Good evening, sir.
At present, we are just on hold for
G Mike.
Mr. Mike GG, no?
Yeah.
All right.
Violence prevention, why you have to spit with some bad intention? So I'm gonna say it, so shall it be. What's the Z far close to the G? You know, say retire the negativity, plus you stay the complete. Even though you have dollars, they fall like rain. Still want drive in another man lane. You don't need no gimme for to make the lyrics public. You don't need no fire pan, no stick, make it get ball like a weight. Gonna jump up in the air, some white beware. We fling bout the lyrics like fear. You don't need no gimme for to make the lyrics public. You don't need no fire pan, no stick, make it ball like a weight. Gonna jump up in the air, some white beware. We fling bout the lyrics like fear.
Mr. G Mike. Good evening, gentlemen. How you guys doing? What's up, G Mike? Everything loud and clear?
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you,
All
sir.
right, wonderful.
Good
The
evening.
mic was not working there. Of course, it's not a perfect science, Greetings, each and every one. I am G. Michael Reed. We're here again on a Wednesday evening for some fruitful discussion. Honored, of course, to see our two panelists. He continues to refer himself as a guest, but Joe Cowie has become a regular panelist, and we're proud of that. Mr. Greg Merson, always there. Welcome, sir. And we are pleased to welcome tonight a very distinguished gentleman. It would take me all night for going down the whole list of accolades that can be awarded this fellow. He's made a mark. I hear you shaking your head, and that's expected of a humble man like yourself. Dr. Harold Young, good evening, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thank you, G. Mike. Hi, everybody.
All right.
Hey, good evening.
Yes. Guys, of course, we do this every Wednesday, and we're guided by Robert's Rules of Order. So we try to keep it on a pretty much civil level, which respect for each other's opinions and whatever offerings we have to give. So let us proceed on that ground. The elephant in the living room, the coronation, a new king,
Yes,
a new king for Belize. Dr. Young, it's appropriate that we have you on for this conversation because we're and let me let you do the introduction as far as your expertise. We know you're a political scientist. Is that correct?
Yes.
You lecture in political science at a
Yes,
university.
and pre-law.
You are a trained attorney.
Yes.
You are a writer.
Yes, of sorts.
All right. So the shaking of head done, and we proceed with that. How do you see? Because now what seems to be on the table is whether Belize will remain
Commonwealth.
what are we now?
Member of the Commonwealth.
Well, I'm hearing that you can be a member of the Commonwealth and not be have the Queen as your head of state. Is
Right.
that you? What's your
I
view
think
on that?
Barbados was the first one to kind of adopt that. I'm not sure, but that's the first time I heard of it, that Barbados is remove the Queen as the head of state, but still remain as a member of the Commonwealth. And I think maybe Mr. Young could address that more, but I think Barbados was the first to kind of move in that shoe.
No, the Commonwealth has 53 countries or 54 countries. Only 12 have the Queen as head of state. That's an old thing. India removed the monarchy 2 years after independence, so in 1950, and they've been in the Commonwealth ever since. And every country that's removed the monarchy has moved the monarch as head of state, has remained in the Commonwealth. The only country that did not, and that's Myanmar. Myanmar is the only country from the British Empire, as far as I know.
Yeah, okay.
On independence, immediately left the Commonwealth, didn't join anything, and cut off all relations. Not cut off all relations, I shouldn't say it like that. That removed the monarch and removed all the ties to the UK and didn't go to the Commonwealth.
How do you?
Okay.
What's your view on the matter, Dr. Young? You think we should go our own way, be a republic? You think?
Yes.
As far as being a republic, or part of the way?
I don't understand the question. The word republic has virtually no meaning. If you ask him, I think we should remove the monarch as the head of state, the answer is yes.
All right, but would not entail us getting a president and putting in place another system of government, actually, than what we have?
You could still keep a parliamentary system, I guess. That's what.
There are many options. You don't have to have a president. You could call him whatever you want.
Joe, how do you see that? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's, I think, quite obvious of now today that what we had before in terms of a governor general was simply more symbolic to maybe show some sort of respect for the past colonial master. But the truth about it is that it's just symbolic because the governor, somewhat similar maybe to what the British is that the monarch reigns and the parliament governs. So to me, the governor of Belize under the present system is just symbolic. It can be consulted, it he can encourage. And those are the things he does, but he doesn't exercise any real power.
Can I ask a question? What difference would it make as far as our governance, where maybe less corruption, a higher level of service to the people? What difference would removing the Queen from our dollar have on our status as a state? Anybody? Dr. Young, what do you think?
First of all, I say you can remove the Queen from the dollar if you want without removing. You can remove the monarch from your currency without removing them as head of state. That's not a requirement. That's just a courtesy the countries do. You don't have to. There's no law. So saying you remove from the dollar is not the same thing as saying removing the monarch from as head of state. No, the monarchy has nothing to do with corruption, and removing the monarch would not improve or decrease or improve or increase, would not improve efficiency or lessen corruption or increase corruption. Will have absolutely no effect.
And what you're saying is that you can remove the Queen's picture from the money, but still keep her as the head of state?
The monarch can be the head of state without being on the money, yes.
Which would you recommend, sir?
I don't care.
I
am more concerned with deep political reform to increase accountability, increase representation, improve quality representation, improve responsiveness of government, improve people's participation in how we're governed, improve checks and balances. The monarchy, as far as I'm concerned, you can do that. The monarch can be there and you can still have reform. It has no effect on the kinds of reform you can do.
Right.
Okay, and there's one thing though, because all those other countries who have removed the monarch as the head of state or even taken him off their money, none of those countries had a Guatemala breathing down their necks as far as we know. How does that factor into it?
Well, I know about Guatemala breathing down our necks. Guyana has a border dispute with Venezuela. China has a border dispute with India. There's Kashmir with India. They've been shooting at each other for decades. Many countries have border disputes that have gone to independence and removed the Queen. It's made no difference.
But most of these countries are equal in strength, don't you think? I mean, they're more so than the disparity between Belize and Guatemala.
Well, I'm not prepared. I'm not interested in debating that point.
I see.
I don't think the Guatemalas are a threat.
You don't see
Guatemala across the board as an invasion. I don't think so. That's my opinion. I don't think so.
Okay. You don't see Guatemala as a threat.
Not in the way you're thinking about. Not in the sense of sending an army across the border. No, I don't.
All right. Gregory, how do you think the Guatemala issue factors into this?
Well,
let me let me say something first, Gregory, before you go on. I'm a little put off by the question in the sense that it insinuates or suggests that the British would come to our defense if Guatemala to invade, and that is a completely different issue, and one that's
you don't think
the monarch will have no influence on whether the British go anywhere. That's a completely parliamentary decision, political decision by the British Parliament. So
is that what happened?
Monarch there has nothing to do with it.
Is that what happened in the Falkland Islands?
The Falkland was a colony. The Falkland Islands was a colony, and the Queen had nothing to do with it. Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, and she decided she needed a political red herring to run in front of the before elections, and so she did that. But the Queen had the monarch had nothing to do with it. The decision was made by Parliament. The irony of the situation is that in the UK, where who the monarch is the head of state, has absolute parliamentary superiority. Absolute parliamentary superiority. They don't even have a check of the judiciary like we do. So the irony of us talking about the monarchy having influence on political decisions is kind of ludicrous. But that's my point.
Don't you think, and we saw it displayed, the affection that the British people have for their monarch, wouldn't that be itself be some influence on what is going on?
I am not even going to respond.
You
Go ahead,
know-
Gregory.
I
Please.
think that, Mr. Chairman, if you allow me
Yeah,
to,
please, sir.
Or whoever.
I think the best we can do about the question you asked is to see how we can maybe inform people about the fallacies and the myth. I
Yeah.
fully agree with Dr. Young. This idea about making all this nice about if you keep the queen, they will have better assurance of guarantee. Those things are just fallacies. The fact about the monarchy is that it does reign in a sense, but it doesn't govern. That's the parliament.
Yeah.
The best for me, as I see, to make the change to the governor general and to another name, the best could come from it is maybe out of a nationalistic fervor. That's about the best. We can say, boy, no, we are more independent. It might not in truth mean that, but we might feel that way. But I believe there have been too much myths, too many fallacies. That to me, the only reason it needs to be discussed is more to better inform people, because what many people believe. I heard people saying that if you remove the queen from the currency, they want to value the dollar. And this is coming from people who have expected better from. So I think this topic, the best we can do with it, I hopefully try to inform people of the facts and the truth as need be.
How would Belize be affected either way, positively or negatively, by such a change, though?
It is almost neutral. If there is
So I mean,
it doesn't want the world
to do it, or
No.
to even talk about it.
It doesn't, to me, deserve too much time in talking about it, except if we want to assist those who unfortunately may continue to entertain these fallacies and myth about this idea of the queen, which I think we have to do, but maybe I don't know if this show is the place to spend too much time on that, educating people about it.
Well, let me just chime in here a little bit. I don't have any problem with removing the king or queen or whoever from our dollar, or even going to a republic sort of government versus a parliamentary system. I think if it's put to the people in a proper way and they vote to change out the source of governance that we have to our republic, then that is fine. That's the people's choice. In terms of benefit, I don't think there's any real difference in those systems, other than you'd have one person that would be held accountable in a republic system where you elect a president that could probably have a little bit more control over the system in terms of setting the agenda for the nation, versus a parliamentary system where it's very fragile in terms that, that if something goes on within the party, the individual could get overthrown and replaced. And we see that constantly in countries like Israel and like that. But I think it is okay to sort of consider that in terms of whether we want to have a parliamentary or a republic as our governance.
Should the decision to do so be taken by Parliament, or should it be put to a referendum?
Oh, it most definitely should be put to a referendum. There's no way that a parliament could be saddled with this, and it would probably be unconstitutional under our current constitution.
But Mr.
No, it wouldn't be.
Sorry to intercede.
Pardon me? What did you say?
Ask Mr. something for clarity.
No.
It's not unconstitutional for the government to just change our system right now to a
supermajority, they can change the constitution.
You mentioned something about parliamentary and republican. What is meant by those terms that you are using just now with republican and parliamentary?
Okay. Well, under a parliamentary system, to me, we have where the leader of the government that then forms the government. Whoever is elected as the leader of the winning party then forms the government, versus a republican system where you elect your leader from amongst whoever submit themselves to be your president, or however you want to call your leader. That's just basically
one
different.
That's not basically it. I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison. That's just one form of republicanism. The word republic barely has any real meaning. You could have all sorts of republics. There are many different kinds around the world. More than half the countries in the world are republics, and no two are quite the same. So what you're referring to is a sort of an American system. You're alluding to an
Right.
American system or countries that copy sort of the American system, but that's not the choice. The choice is there's so many choices. There's so many ways you could configure your government.
But
All
then
right,
what's the basic difference then between a republic and a parliamentary system?
As I said, the word republic barely has any meaning. It just means you could call the person the president and nominate them.
Right.
You could call the person the president and elect them, and it'd still be a republic. So it doesn't. Being a republic and having a president doesn't mean the president is elected by the people. Trinidad is a republic, and the president in Trinidad is not elected. He's picked by the prime minister, basically. Guyana doesn't even have they have a president, but the president is elected because they have a PR system, a proportional representation system.
Okay.
But I mean, India doesn't have an elected president. It's governed by a prime minister, and it's a republic. It's a republic.
So that's just a name, not a way to say.
What I'm saying is the word republic has many variations.
That's right.
That there's no
It just means
definitive.
it's just the opposite of having a monarchy, then, if you want to put it that way.
Can I say something here, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, let me first of all say,
What could lead us astray is to begin to put a label on systems of government, whether they are republic. I don't think we should be doing that.
Not necessary.
What I think we should be doing is say, listen, do we want the number one person? Call him whatever you want, prime minister, president. Do you want him to elected by the popular votes of the people or not?
Right.
Those are the things. So, not if we begin to talk about terms like Republican, parliamentary, this will only muddy the waters. You elect the leader of your country either by the popular votes, or he derives the legitimacy from the parliament, as in the case with Belize. The prime minister of the country derives his legitimacy at the wish of the parliament, in the sense that the majority, the party that wins the election, is the person who can command the majority will become the prime minister. That's it.
Right.
So I think we should try to stay away from labels. Otherwise, we'll spend the whole night. There are so many different types of labels you have.
But we can't really stay away from it when the prime minister of our country says we want to be. He's considering that maybe we want to be a republic. So we need to kind of see where that will take us and what form that will take for us.
What we ask you to do is to ask the prime minister what he means by that.
we don't have him to ask.
I read the interview. The prime minister was asking the context of whether they should retain the monarchy. So he was using it as an alternate to not having the monarch.
That's about that.
That's all. That's as far as it goes.
Yeah.
So you're saying he was not saying that, but the way he phrased it at the end,
at some point.
The way he phrased it at the end was that Belize would consider it, or Belize is considering it, and they may make that change. And now that we have a people constitutional reform committee going on, it seems that to me that this was already premise of what was the plan all along, that this would come up at this point. That's how I see it. That this was all along part of what the constitutional committee was going to be charged with, although they may not have known at the time, and they may know it now since it's been brought in the forefront of thoughts to them. But that's my concern, that they sneak it under the radar and now kind of flushing it out or see where it goes.
With all due respect, I read the act that creates the People's Constitutional Commission, and they are charged with no such thing. They're charged with making a report to the Prime Minister. That's all. The report can have anything in it.
You were a member.
There are no dictates. There are no dictates of what the report should have in it.
You were a member of that committee, weren't you, Mr.
No, I was not. No, I was not.
Okay. But you are aware of the terms of reference, if you will.
I read the act that created them. Yes.
All right. What do you believe? Is it time for us to review the Constitution?
It's way overdue.
Any particular changes that you would like to see made?
Well, I already said one. correct? I gave one.
Which one? The change of the monarch
Yes.
as head of state.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not going to prescribe any specific answer for that. I will say that as a political scientist, my position is to offer the best advice as to what alternatives, and Belize can choose the best alternative for Belize. There are many, many variations of what we can do.
Can you give us an example of one that you think would fit our bill?
The broadest category is probably, and again, there are many variations under this, but the broadest category is something called a mixed system. Which means you have part first past the post membership, which is what we have now, parliamentary, and you also have a proportional representation section.
Okay.
So you have a mixed session. Many countries have it.
There are people who thinks that maybe the area representatives should stick to representing their areas, and that maybe cabinet should be chosen from technocrats. Any views on that?
If they so wish, that's another choice. That's what I'm saying. That's another option.
Mm-hmm.
That's going into the separation of powers. That's separating the executive from the legislature. What we have right now, as we have in the UK and many, many other countries, where the executive, we call it the executive, but it's really a part of the legislature, basically an appendage of the legislature that dictates what goes on.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have separation of the two, then you can think about how that can be done, and there are many ways to do it. One way is to do what you suggested.
Can I get your view on the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and our role? Do you see that being accepted, and you see it making a difference in our governance? Do you have a view on that?
Marginal. I mean, I support it. United Nations, I support it.
But you don't think it's going to have that much of an effect on our...
It has had some marginal effect, but I believe, and I keep saying this repeatedly, that part of an approach to deal with corruption is to look at serious constitutional reform, to put in more checks and balances. The former minister, Mr. Koi, who I know very well, I've known him since I was a child. He's very close to my family. We have talked about this, and I used this example with him, and we discussed it, and he was right, and I will repeat what we said. One simple thing, just to give you an example of what can be done, is the Auditor General's report.
Mm-hmm.
The Auditor General's report goes to the Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister doesn't do anything with it, then nothing happens. There's nothing that can force the Prime Minister to do anything.
But there should be.
So an answer would be is to make the Auditor General's report automatically public on it being handed to the Prime Minister.
Of course, I imagine then you would have to make
one little thing.
But then the appointment of such a contractor general, though, would have to be transparent also, because
then you move into another area. Then you move into an area of
it'll be the same thing.
How people get seated. But the Auditor General has to be the Auditor General.
The Auditor General, yeah.
The Auditor General's report can be commanded. When I mean commanded, can be made that they have to do it by law. And once it's open to public scrutiny on presenting it at the Prime Minister, then anybody can look at it and see if they're cooking the books.
You have gone on record as suggesting that maybe the Senate should be abolished. Do you still hold that view?
I didn't say. I believe I said that's a serious option and one that should be seriously considered. There are many countries in the world, including some in the Caribbean, at least one or two in the Caribbean, that are unicameral, meaning having one house, one assembly, different names, right? But the same thing. One body of representatives. It has its pros and cons. I personally think the Senate, as it is now in its form, does not serve any great purpose.
I would
I'm
agree
not saying
with
it doesn't do anything at all. I'm just saying
yeah,
I don't think has a significant role.
balance. Yeah, it doesn't change the color of what's happening. I wanted to just say I believe that we should keep a Senate, however, but it should be an elected Senate. That's one of the reform I would like to see if it's kept, but I think it's necessary. I think an elected Senate creates a good deliberating balance to the issues of the parliament in the House of Representatives.
To be a provocateur, if you say you're going to elect the Senate and the Senate and the House are from two different parties, you're going to end up with gridlock. You'll get nothing done. And I no need to call any country where that happens.
And
I'm not sure that I'm not sure that it would be gridlock. I think that there could be ways if you have two different party. But I think that if they're elected, they are also accountable. And I don't think they're accountable to different people. And I don't think the issues are different that they're addressed. So I think you'll find consensus and that it would work.
Our representatives are elected, and I don't think they're accountable at all. I don't know. An elected Senate would make that much a difference. I really don't think so. Because given the way people tend to vote, they will probably vote along party lines anyway. And if you have a house of one party, you likely will have a Senate of the same, and you'll have the same situation all over again, where it's only a rubber stamp as it is right now. And that's an opinion. Joe, how you see that? What do you think?
I, for one, will say this, that every human institution, from time to time, should evaluate its performance based on the system he sets up. And when he applies everything to the system he set up, at the end of a periodical, if a business they use 1 year, they should look at what is it that they had in place, do that evaluation, see where is it that they need to improve, and then they make their improvement. The problem with us in Belize, as a practitioner myself in government, both appointed and elected, the number one problem with us is that we are not complying with the Constitution. We are not complying with the provisional laws that flow from the Constitution. So to me, while the exercise of looking at the Constitution to see where you can improve it, I am not against it. The problem is that we come up with what we believe is the best, and we still don't apply it. So the number one problem for us is to how do we enforce compliance? And I can give you many examples. of the failure to comply. The Finance and Audit Reform Act, obviously outstanding because it's at the core of the oversight of public funds. You have you have many others. You have the finance laws. You have the store orders. You have the Transparency and Accountability Act. And the problem is us, we are not in fact enforcing them. The court, they took a case to court and they asked for a declaration as to whether the Prime Minister has violated the Finance and the Audit Reform Act regarding the supplementaries. And the court declared, yes, he did. But what did we do? So I think that what we have to begin to look at, while yes, we can look at how we can improve, but you don't know what you want to improve unless you have tried what you have.
I don't know if the bigger part of the problem is not that we don't even have a knowledge of what the Constitution is. Few people have even read the Constitution except for the little parts that are from time to time are brought forward when issues are raised. But do we even know what the Constitution says? Then how can we know whether we want to change it or not? Isn't it the first step might be to educate the people as to what the current Constitution is saying before we can even figure out what we want to change about it?
Well, that is definitely true. And that's one of the first questions probably our Prime Minister should have answered. What deficiency does he see in our current Constitution that would make us want to change our system of governance from a parliamentary system to a republic type of system? And until we get those kind of answers, we're just throwing out things and ideas and not knowing what benefit or what ill any of these changes would bring about for us.
Fellow,
We do, citizens do, you don't have to read the Constitution to know what's wrong.
excuse
People
me.
know. You don't have to read the Constitution to
Yeah,
know what's
that's
wrong.
correct.
If you don't
If you
know
ask the
what, how
person-
can you? How,
But if
Harold?
you ask the person in the street what's wrong in any
Mhm.
country, any person in any country,
Yes.
because most people in most countries have never read their constitution. Even in the United States, they've never read their constitution. And it's the shortest constitution in the world. So ours is like almost one of the longest in the world. It's like in the top 25% of long constitutions.
Mhm.
So, but if you ask people in the street what's wrong, people can tell you from their perspective what's wrong.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you address those concerns? And that's what people like myself and Mr. Koye and anybody else who wants to participate, that's what we should be doing. Thinking about how do you address what people are saying is wrong. When people say there's corruption, well, how do you deal with corruption? When you say there's no accountability of how do you deal with that? What kinds of checks and balances can we designed to put in? Mr. Koye just mentioned that we don't enforce. Well, why don't we enforce? Because some of these institutions are really weak. For example, the judiciary, which includes not just the courts not just the court itself, but the entire branch of government, gets less than 1% of the national budget. And that has been like that for administration in, administration out since independence. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and
less
also
than 1%.
And also
one
the
branch of
participatory.
government gets less than 1%.
Yeah.
We
And
have
also-
magistrates. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, I was going to say we have magistrates because I've collected the data on it, and looked at it. We have magistrates who, on average, and this was in 2019, around 2019, they dispose of. I didn't say they listen to every case. They disposed of an average of 5,000 cases each a year, and that's excluding family and traffic. So we have a system that's beleaguered with work, right? We have a DPP's office that's willfully on the staff, and the DPP is our Department of Justice, so to speak. So our public law action, which would do the things that you're talking about, hold the government accountable for things that they do, is very weak.
I think one of the issues we have, I think one of the issues we have is that we don't have a fully participating democracy. People, after they exercise that vote in however manner they do, they walk away and just leave everything to the government and do not keep as agitating for whatever it is the government had promised to do, and then they complain at the end, but they don't actively find a vehicle to participate and to hold that government accountable. And so it's just come back to me in 5 years and we'll go again at it.
I think the worst part is too that if it's my government, I support it. If it's not, I oppose it, and not really looking at the issue at all. Joe, you were getting ready to say something there.
I wanted to maybe highlight some of the points that Dr. Young made just now regarding the judiciary system. And it says that 1% of the budget. I think I heard him say that. Now, 1% of the budget is just 14 million. And I agree that if we are governed by the rule of law, and we seem not to be committed to strengthening the judicial system, you begin to question why. Justice delayed is justice denied. If you can only give 1% to the bulwark of your democracy, which is in fact the judicial system or the rule of law, something is wrong.
But am I hearing that the judiciary only gets 1% of the budget?
I am
Less than 1%.
Right.
Are you serious?
I'm saying if it is less, even worse.
Yes.
1% of the budget, Mr. Chairman, is
It's
only
been like that for 42 years.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I heard different. I mean, I have to go research, right? So I will, but I wasn't aware of that at all. If that is dismal, if that's the truth. In particular,
Every
uh,
go ahead, sorry.
I saw today two murder cases just walk away, and we got one dismal 3% conviction rate, and half of those are overturned on appeal. So I can't see us not. And you might be right, Gregory, and Joe always points it out that we need participatory democracy where people get involved in the issues and speak. We're doing that on this show, so Harold, I hope you don't mind because that's what we are trying to do. And I don't know if you think we're not doing it well enough, but we're happy to have you give us some recommendations. No.
Well, I've said it. I'll say it again. I agree that we need more participation, more active participation in between elections, and one way of doing that is to do constitutional reforms to the party system, to how we elect people. That's one way to start to change that dynamic.
How
People
we elect?
complain. One of the complaints, you said people don't read the constitution, but what people complain about is we don't have enough choice, we don't have enough parties. Well, there is no country. There's one half exception. I'll tell you what it is in the end. At the end, there's no country that has our system of government. Let's use the term loosely, Westminster parliamentary system. There is no country that has a significant third party. Ever. The system does not generate more than two parties. And I'm not saying that as just a matter of opinion. I'm talking about having looked at all the countries with this system. The closest they've come is in the UK for one term, where the Liberal Party shared power. And that lasted one term. The system does not generate more than one party.
Do you think
more than two major parties?
Do we need more than two?
Well, I'm not saying whether we need more than two or not. I'm saying that is a complaint of people. When you talk to people, say, we're tired of these two parties, we want new parties. We want new people involved. And I am not there to judge that. I am there to say, okay, if that is a concern of the people believe, or a significant portion of people believes, then we need to think about how do you do that?
But don't you think it's more important that we elect the right people as opposed to the right number of parties? Because the right number, where would more than and yeah, I understand you thinking it's funny, but
it's funny because you know why it's funny, G Mike? Because how do you get people to run? The way to get people to run is to make them feel like they have a chance of winning, make them feel they can make a difference. And if that means engendering more parties, then maybe that's how it needs to be.
Do you really think that most of the people who run do so because they think they can make a difference, or they can make a difference for their own personal interest?
I'm not here to make any moral judgments on people's.
But you have opinions, don't you?
And I will not be drawn into that conversation.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about political reform and the kinds of things we can do, then yes, I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be drawn into anybody's motives.
Then I guess we start getting, if you want more participation in political parties, is starting to look at proportional representation or post representation. Then you start saying that a portion of your vote will go to these other party in terms of how they could show up with some level of voting.
Yes, and there are many ways. Again, the term proportional representation is a catch-all for many different ways of doing proportional representation. There are many formulas for doing that. The worst one, I will say, since you want something specific, the worst one is to have an election and say, if a party gets, I'm making this up totally, right? A party gets 60% of the vote, then they get 60% of the seats. A party gets 40%, they get, let me just change that. A party gets 60% of the vote, they get 60% of the seats. A party gets 20% of the votes, they get 20% of the seats. A party gets 20% of the votes, they get 20%. That's the worst.
It is, because it's hard to determine who to cut and where to cut.
No,
Yeah.
it's not that. That's not. I'm sorry. That may be a party issue, but that's not the main concern. The main concern is that then the parties, history has shown, the record has shown, that the parties then start to draw, especially in heterogeneous societies, start to draw on the lowest common denominator. And the lowest common denominators. And the lowest common denominators are race, religion, and gender.
Okay.
And once you get that, you end up with a mess. And the best example of where a mess exists is Lebanon, where it is drawn by religion. And every religion that's there has in parliament. Their governments cannot survive. They do not function. In the Caribbean, we have a situation in Guyana of proportional representation where it's drawn along racial lines, and it's led to violence.
Yes.
So that's to give you, if you want something concrete to look at, that's a clear way of, you can say history has shown that doing PR like that is not advantageous. But there are other ways of doing proportional representation.
What are some of the other ways? I'm just trying to think, because that's the one that comes most to mind, those ones where you just give a portion. What are some of the other considerations for that type of sharing?
There's one system that's used in a number of countries, and some of the details vary by country. But the gist of it is that you have, and that's why I was talking about a mixed system earlier.
Okay.
So you have your constituencies and you have elections, right? You have all your standard bearers for how many other parties there are in each constituency. The number of constituencies, that's a different issue. How many constituencies you have? That's not the issue.
Right.
So you have this, and then in addition, you have what's called a list, which is a list of names, and each party has a party list. And again, the number on the list can vary. It can be 10, it can be 5, it can be 8, it can be 12, it can be whatever number the country decides. But you have a list.
Okay.
And then when you have elections, those who win the majority in their constituency are elected. You then aggregate all the votes the parties get. So if you have 3 parties, let's just say, just so we can have a discussion, for example. If you have 3 parties, you aggregate all the votes across the constituencies, and then use that proportion of the overall vote cast, not registered votes cast, to determine how many people from the list you get to be in the parliament. There are lots of details. That's very broad. There are lots of details. There's like threshold, there's the number on the list. There's threshold questions. There's what happens when there's a tie, if there's the same amount of percentage. There's like, do you round off the percentage? There's lots of details. That's the broad and popular way that's used in many countries, a number of countries.
Looking from your point of view, Harold, having looked at different systems of government and whatnot, what do we need? What would be your recommendation for us to attain better governance?
Without the details, because I think the details are, and I want to say something about Constitution generally afterwards, but I broadly speaking, I recommend that we seriously look at a mixed system where you do first past the post constituencies and vote aggregate. One of the reasons for this vote aggregate this vote aggregate formula is because if I'm a voter in Caribbean Shores, if I'm a voter in whatever constituency it is, right, and I want to vote for the third party, or for a third party, or a minor party, under the current system, I get that person doesn't win, and no independent or any third party outside the two dominant parties in Belize have ever even gotten back their money, their deposit. But if the country knows that if I vote for the third party, I may not win, my party may not win that seat, but the aggregate across the country of people voting for that party candidate in their constituency may result in a seat, may encourage me to say, well, I may not be wasting my vote. I may, my party may cross the threshold, whatever the threshold is, and qualify to get a seat. So that's one huge advantage. It makes you want to not necessarily feel you're throwing away your vote by voting for a third party or independent
Mr. Chairman, if you allow me to comment at this point.
Please do, sir.
I would like to reinforce the point being made by Dr. Young in terms of proportional representation of the Belize. Let's look at our history since 1950 quickly. And we can go from 1950 to 1984, when the People's United Party dominated politics in the country, until when in 1984 it was defeated. The truth about it, and I'm using it now firstly in a hypothetical sense or a theoretical sense, at the present system, a plurality of 31 votes can give you 31 seats of one party in a parliament.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
We have to become conscious that there was a period when the PUP dominated 18 seats. Even Golson was defeated. But when you look at the numbers that the opposition garnered at the polls, evidently it was not zero, but they had zero representation.
Yes.
So, I believe that we have to look at our culture. We have to look at our behavior. There are so many things we need to look at, because I feel strongly. I'm not going into the details. I do not know them as much as the doctor do. But I would say this, that if we had proportional representation, we would not be having such wide swing of the pendulum.
Yeah.
This term, one in 1984, it was a big sweep. PUP lost, big. The euphoria was there. Bam, they lost their support. The pendulum switched the other way. This to me is not good for Belize. It is not. And I think it's about time we look seriously at trying to change this simple majority by numbers in our constituency or overall. So I think that is an area, given our culture. You see, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned something. How we did determine how do we elect the right person? If 30% of us have the capacity, have the political sophistication, the knowledge to elect the right person, but the 70 doesn't, we the 30 will never get representation. Never. A matter of fact, this to me, the majority dictatorship. That's what it amounts to. Majority dictatorship. So if the 30% of us are better equipped, better knowledgeable as to elect the right person, as you said, but they will have no representation. That's not democracy. That's dictatorship by majority.
As is the case in Barbados right now. 2 terms.
Yes. Full election.
2 terms.
Very good.
Not one opposition person was elected.
Right.
So I would end by saying this on that topic, Mr. Chairman. I think we want to review this constitution. Quite frankly, whatever happened to us in terms of a high percentage of crime, poverty, corruption, I believe if we had gone for looking at some proportional representation, perhaps it would not have gone so bad. You see, when people begin to feel that you can win through the patronage system, which has happened, and stop the fool ourselves. The patronage system is very entrenched in this country. It's entrenched. And that patronage system will prevail under the system of government. The system of government nurtures the patronage system. It nurtures it. You don't have to have the majority to win the elections. So what we do to counter that?
Wait. You don't have to have the majority to win the election.
No.
No,
Why not? Why
I
not?
need to export in it.
The total number of people could be on the other side, but just you got elected because the representative they had more votes than the other party.
Right.
No, well, we could be very specific. We could be very specific.
Yeah.
Just using very simple numbers.
Mhm.
If you have 100, I think Mr. Cohen, Mr. Hossein, maybe correct me. We have like 120,000 people registered to vote. Is that correct? Around that?
Somewhere around there, 105, 120, I think was the last count.
Something like that. Let's say 120. Just to use that number.
Uh-huh.
Let's say 120. That is only of the people who are registered. That's not eligible. People eligible to register.
Mhm.
First of all, right? So that's not everybody over 18 and
Mhm.
competent. So that's the first thing. So it's not everybody.
Right.
Then you have a turnout that's not 100%.
Mhm.
So when you go to the polls, that means in your constituency, if 80% of the people, let's not, 80 is high. Let's use something more reasonable for normal election. Not
About 70,
election.
about
Let's say
70%.
70. Say 70% go to vote. And so that means you have to win what percentage of that 70%? If there's only two parties, what percentage do you have to win?
50%.
yeah.
About
Well, the
50%.
No, you have to win 36%
Of
Yeah.
the 70.
That's right.
of the 70.
But
That's right.
not even so. You could win less because or
No, I said if you only have two parties.
no,
only
even if you have
parties.
two parties, because someone could win, and because our constituents aren't properly proportioned in
Well,
terms
we
of
know
the
that.
number
Yeah.
of representative number of people in those divisions.
Now, Mr. Young is talking about the representatives.
Yes,
That's
no, I
a
understand.
little different. That is true what you're saying, Mr. Morrison. That's a different discussion, I think.
Okay.
We can come to that. Yeah, that needs to be done. That's by the constitution. We're supposed to rebalance the constitution, the constituency. But you could have somebody win a constituency with 35.01% by
Of the,
one vote.
Yeah.
So that person is a minority majority representative. I don't know what term you'd use. But
yeah.
you see
I
my
think
point, right?
you covered it well. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have an electorate that's what's the word? Cynical or discouraged from voting because of whatever reason, right? You could have less. Look at our municipalities. What kind of turnouts they have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Those are
So-
around
so
50,
the system
60%.
does
It's
not-
usually lower than the general elections.
I don't know that that's clear enough though. What you're talking about, if you have a constituency with 8,000 members, you're telling me that there are two people running in that constituency, one for PUP and one for UDP. One only has to get 36% of the number of votes cast to be elected.
No,
No,
based
what you're
on the
saying?
number of
70%
percentage of
turnout.
people that participated.
Yeah, but
Yes.
I
You
mean,
could be registered and don't go vote. I'm saying if 70% of those who are registered to vote go and vote,
right,
and there are only two candidates, the
right.
candidate that wins only has to win by one vote.
In other words, if you got 8,000 registered voters, 70% came out. That's 5,600.
Right.
All you need then is 2,801.
Yes.
Which you're talking about the
I
percentage
think
of the total numbers of
Yes.
of
Yeah.
voters,
Yes,
not
yes.
not those who vote. But if
That's
you
right.
don't, if you are a registered voter and you don't vote, then you don't have a voice. You
Well,
have
that's
not
not
have a
true, you
voice.
know.
No,
That's
no,
not
no,
really
no, no, no.
true. That's not really true
Sure.
in society. It is true in participating democracy as we do, but it's not true. Those people are still to be accounted for.
But they haven't voted.
That's true. But they
So are you
still
saying if they haven't
exist. They
voted
still exist,
G-Mike, they
right?
should not go to they're not eligible for any public services?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they don't have a role in who's being elected, Dr. Young.
Well,
They don't have a role because they have not voted.
But that's not true.
Unless they're being prevented
okay.
from voting. Are they
Okay,
being
Chair.
prevented from voting?
Okay, Chair. That's fine. I understand.
You're so condescending, though, man. Really. Anyway,
But you're
let's go on.
breaking your own rule, Chair.
Let's look at
You're breaking your own
something else.
rule.
Let's look at something else.
You're breaking your own rule.
Let's change over here for a minute. Reparation, because I saw an article that you had some words about that and some views on that matter. Can we look to forward to some reparation at some point in the future? And how do you recommend we would go about getting it and handling it? Should we get it?
I cannot answer that question. What I can give you, I can. That question is that's an impossible question for me to answer. But I can make some points about the question. First of all, we need to think about reparations more broadly. The idea of that's thrown around with reparations that you want some money in your bank account, you'll get $10,000 in your account. That is not what reparation is.
Mm-hmm.
Reparations can take in many forms.
Right.
And we have to think very comprehensively about that, and that's being done. I'm not being a genius here about that at all. People are way ahead of me with that. I'm just following when it comes to that. That's being thought about in very comprehensive ways. How reparations can be done. Reparations are also we will never. Part of reparations is not just money or policy changes or trade agreements or educational opportunities. It's also trying to heal the psychological trauma or PTSD that we suffer from slavery. Those countries that had slavery and colonization. And part of that is that the country that does it needs to make amends publicly, and the word apology, in my view, will never pass the lips of those people, of that group. The reason for that is because that word apology or apologize for denotes culpability, which then puts you into the court system, which means you could say the person has admitted that they have done something wrong. So we have to think about that. And are we going to worry about that? I can't. When I say worry about it, I mean, are we going to make that a pillar of our reparations? That could be. We can think about that. And I'll point out one more thing, and then Mr. Kawhi or whoever was the second comment, is that when slavery was abolished in the British Empire, it was done so where all the slave masters, owners of enslaved peoples, were compensated for loss of their property, quote unquote. Millions of pounds were paid out by the British Parliament, authorized by the British Parliament to come out of the coffers, which were filled by the empire, to pay the slave owners. So I think that's something that we should keep in mind.
I think that as Dr. Young says, reparation is a tough one to follow. But what I do, and it could take many forms, and what I do believe it should probably take the form. And at one point, I think just before COVID, the British government had agreed to put a sizable amount of money. I think it was like 300 million that they were going to divide up between Caribbean countries. And I thought that would have been the answer in some ways to kind of address this. I don't think, like he said, people end up with money in their bank account. That's not what's going to happen. But it could be so that funds are provided to these countries so that they can do some of the stuff that they need to do to try and help their economy and their people.
Who's going to make it happen? Who's going to hold them accountable for the money?
Well, there's no way to hold them accountable other than to keep begging for it and pressuring them and shame them. No, there's no way. There's no legal way to get.
That's not what I'm talking about. If they give it to the government and say this is for your people for reparation, who's going to hold the government accountable?
I don't think they'll say that. That's what I'm saying. When the British was just before, if you go back and research it, I had some tracks on it and I lost it. Just before COVID hit, when things were looking up for all the countries of the world, particularly for those in the West. The British had said they were going to allocate like $300 million to the Caribbean as some type of funds to help those economies. And I think that in my mind, what they were doing, because at that time there was some noise about reparation. And I think in my mind, that's what they were trying to address. And so there's no way to really hold them accountable to make that funds, but I think they have some responsibility to revisit that. And I know that for right now they are going through a very difficult time. There are lots going on with their own inflation and unemployment, and lots going on since COVID. But I think it needs to be brought back to the table so that we could look at it and see how such funds could be channeled, and then our government, whatever portion, how it's divvied up within the Caribbean countries, 20 or 22 countries. Actually, at this point, I think Belize is not even a member on the reparation committee for CARICOM. But that's a different story.
Let me proffer an opinion here, because I believe Dr. Young used the word apology. And I think the biggest part of this problem is that the white race has never apologized. That would be a step forward. Now, he's suggesting that I would got to create some culpability on their part, and then
legal culpability,
court cases and whatnot. But I don't know. I mean, so far they've been just saying, "But get over it. It happened. It didn't happen to you. I didn't do it. You didn't suffer as a result." But and it goes back to what one of those leaders in the U.S. was saying, that while it didn't happen to me. I suffer the consequences of the superiority that you hold, as a consequence of that period of slavery, where we built that country from the ground up, and now you are. I believe that also reparation can include some money. During COVID, did not every single American get a check in the mail, a stimulus check? Maybe they could say just single out every black person and or black heritage, and send some kind of check. That can be done. Would that make a difference? Would that
I don't think money is given out that freely. I think they
Mr. Morrison, to your point about the $300 million, that's a laughable amount. The monarch, they spent $250 million US on the coronation. They spent 100 million pounds on the coronation. So for me to consider that is laughable. And also, putting aside a lump sum is an effort to end it, to stop the talk. This is not, and slavery and what the colonialism and slavery lasted 400, depending on which country, of course, up to 400 something years. And a one-shot thing like that to me is just broadly speaking, is not worthy of discussion.
No, I wasn't saying it was. I was kind of saying that was what they had done. And you're right. It does need to be more comprehensive, because to me, some of the effects of slavery and the effects of the control that colonialism has had still exist today. And some of the machinery of how it works still exists. Maybe not so much in Belize, but for sure some exist. But in Africa, with France and some other countries that are still reaping and forcing African countries to deposit their money with the French bank and things like that, still cause some of the problems that exist for those countries. And then when they deposit their money, they have to borrow it back as a loan, paying interest again on their own deposit. So there are lots of crazy things that colonialism...
Mr. Morrison, you're correct. Oh, you're correct. I agree with you. But the Belize, we're not exempt. Our entire system is a colonial system. Our entire system of governance is a colonial system.
No, I agree.
That's why it's called the Westminster model.
Yes,
because it's modeled off the Westminster. Our entire system is colonial. It's a colonial hangover.
Mr. Chairman.
Everything.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
I want to comment on this reparation, but I want to maybe give it to you from a very simple perspective of mine. We'll take the ordinary meaning, if I could remember what it is. Reparation is to make amends for wrongs that was done.
Correct.
Simple meaning, I think it is understandable. Though, evidently, we could never quantify in dollars the wrongs that were done.
Exactly.
But that to me is not going to a court and said, listen, you wronged me and I'm claiming damages. So therefore, Fox, you need to play Dominion so much. That is not the case here because you cannot measure that. So therefore, how do you make amends for wrongs that you did when you can't even measure the wrongs? How do you do that? How do you make amends?
Apology.
All right. If the person offended by the wrongs you did is satisfied with an apology, then you're settled. But suppose they are saying, no. We want.
So what do they want? Well, what's next? Blood?
No, I think that is being irrational.
Well, no. But
hold on.
What are the options?
All right, let's say they want revenge. So they want blood. They want to kill out everybody when they offend with all their ancestors. But that is going too far. Let's try to be more realistic and down to earth. How do you make amends for wrongs that cannot be measured, cannot be quantified? And that is what is facing the whole reparation issue. Second, let me say this, and I think the lawyers can more qualify this. The people who did the wrongs can, one, through pressure, voluntarily in a sense, by being pressured, not by going to no court for a decision. Simply they wanted to try to save face today and to make it look indeed that, we were wrong. My ancestors were wrong. The Germans were wrong for what they did to the Jews. The Nazis were wrong. So therefore, today's Germany wants to make up. So if you are doing it out of believing that you have a conscience and that you're wrong these people, you will then say, well, listen, this is what I would like to do. And that's what you do. No, it's not a case now that you have to go to a court, meet the international court. Then that is a different matter. So this reparation we're talking about, the ones that anyway you have experience in, I'm not too experienced in exactly what is happening. What are the amends they are looking at? Or wrongs that were in fact committed? What are these amends? The question is that wrongs were committed and we are asking for reparation, which is you're looking for amends, right, for the wrong. What is it that they are asking for? Those who are asking for amends for wrongs that were done to them.
Well, I think probably as we look at, as I was trying to say earlier, the system still exists that is predatory. If we look at what's happening in almost every non-Western country, in how their resources are being depleted, and not only that, after they remove the resource, the environment is destroyed. We see a lot of the issues that they need to address, and until capitalism and the system that drives that sort of kind of come to some clarity, there'll be no one that will be there to say we have done wrong or we are continuing to do wrong to make those type of changes. So it seems to me that there have to be a whole different paradigm change in the psyche of how we approach economic moving forward, because people in terms of the capitalist system, it will not change. It will not change.
Can I ask you a clarification here, Mr. Morrison?
Yes, sir.
This amends, is it limited to only the colonial period when you are a colony of an empire? Was it that you're referring to? Are you referring to cases where sovereign nations allowed multinational corporations to come to their country and damage their rivers, their forests? What are the wrongs you are referring to? Is it the wrongs of the colonial period? Or is it the wrongs that came out of globalization and this whole idea of the liberal policy. Which wrongs you are referring to?
I'm referring mainly to the latter. I believe that the ones that are associated with slavery, and also the ones that are currently going on now, because they pile into the same issue because of the structure of the system of economics, that because slavery was basically an economic advantage, right? So it to me it's the same. I don't see a difference between it.
I disagree with that.
We get one feedback from somebody. Something is happening.
Yeah,
Somebody got something on that's giving us a feedback. Can we identify that, please? Anybody got one radio on or something? I don't. There it is. It stopped. All right, Harold, that was you.
In the case of colonialism, yes, it was imposed by force on the colonies. That was imposed by force. Now, when these countries got their independence, and they decide, and especially during the period of globalization, where neoliberalism was in fact very strong, supported by the IMF and WTO, where there was free trade, free movement of capital. This was a neoliberal movement. And there are countries, the smaller so-called developing countries, which indeed could not have coped with globalization. And by invitation, they did bring these powerful companies, multinational companies. It could have been in Brazil, it could have been in Tanzania, somewhere. And yes, they went in at the invitation of sovereign states. But because of the power that they had, and because of the particular leaders at the time who colluded with them,
yes,
which is what maybe we are referring to as neocolonialism.
Yes.
When the doctor mentioned about colonialism existed here, I wanted to agree with him, except I would say it's neocolonialism, because we do have colonialism still, but not as it was, except that now the colonizer is us.
Yeah.
So let me get it clear, this reparation, I don't think, but again, somebody need to tell me. I thought that the reparation was when you were being abused as a colony. Or is it extended to when multinationals came to your country at your invitation? Meaning, if the leader, autocratic leader or democratically elected leader invited you, but then you abuse the forest, you abuse the
I don't think that's what is being referred to here. I think we're talking about reparation from the servitude of one people to another. Slavery, whether it's in the U.S. or the Caribbean, that one nation slaving another, or one ethnic group enslaving another ethnic group, man against man, being unjust. I think the reparation is for that, not necessarily colonialism to colonies, etc., etc. But
neocolonialism.
That would be a different matter altogether. But with the type of reparations against human beings who were subjected to the atrocities of slavery.
Yeah, but is it only during the colonial period, as we knew it then, with these big metropolitan powers, Britain, Portugal, Spain, etc.
Yeah.
Portugal.
Yeah.
Are you referring to what we could call the post-colonial period in a sense of when countries begin to get their independence from?
No, I think my reference
by that time.
Yeah, my reference.
Go ahead.
My reference is to slavery, but I'm saying the wrong that exists still continues to exist through these setup of government and stuff that are still carrying out the same colonial practices through the leadership of even the native people, right?
So the reparation that you are referring to goes beyond that type of colonial period. It comes up to the period when countries are considered to have been sovereign independent.
No. The colonial the reparation I'm referring to stops after slavery.
That's it. We're done.
But I'm saying the practice until the governments of these countries, these Western countries, start addressing those issues, the wrong is still being done.
Yes, I agree with that. But that's not what they're asking reparation for.
No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking reparation for just slavery.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And I've never been one to ask for reparation because I don't see it coming in any form other than probably in terms of direct payment to people. I don't see American government giving black people $40,000 or $50,000 or what. I don't see that ever happening. Okay. And so I don't see that happening. It may seem to appear and now it may not even happen in that way because I don't see Britain giving a portion of money to say all the black descendants of slaves that are from Belize. I see them giving a block of money to the government to say, build up some of your infrastructures. Here's a grant to take care of these things and consider this block of money for as an assistance for some of the wrong we did to your people.
But again, of course, that goes back to what Joe was saying, that if you put a price on freedom, what size price would you put?
But you never can. You can address that. But we only have money to kind of evaluate it, and we only will have X dollars to address it.
How about first of all a genuine apology and repentance, that we will make sure this never happens again.
Nobody could guarantee that something will never happen again. I don't think there's anyone.
I think the human race can guarantee that slavery will not happen again. We
will.
Slavery can exist right now.
You could put that.
Human trafficking is still occurring. But the idea of quantifying, we have to think about how there are different ways to think about quantifying. Yes, you can think about quantifying like a life. You can think about it that way. And I can tell you that post World War II, Jews in Austria were paid €7,000 for each survivor was given €7,000, just over €7,000, and a further payment of €1,000 or something. But that was done in Austria. Germany did something as well. So numbers can be come up with. They can come up with numbers. Should it only be based on humans, or should it also be based because they have the records of all the money that was taken into the coffers of, we're talking about Britain right now, since it's the least, that were taken into the UK based on exploitation of the country?
Could we start somewhere?
Those numbers are there. You can, I mean, India has talked about it, that their economy,
$50 trillion.
Their economy in 100 years of colonialism, we're not even talking about slavery or enslaving people. Colony went from 25% of the world's GDP to 3% of the world's GDP. They were reduced from 25% to 3% of the world's GDP by literally destroying the native industries and started extracting raw material. So there are ways, and they have the numbers. They can quantify it.
You too.
But that amount of money doesn't exist in the world, and people to
what?
I'm not saying.
Go ahead.
I'm not saying that money should be done in dollar for dollar. I'm saying the idea that some number cannot be quantified in some way is not true.
I agree. I agree.
But
you could quantify something.
Something else too, because you guys cannot flippantly dismiss it as that slavery exists still. So you're not. But the slavery of one ethnic group of another ethnic group can be ensured to not happen again. Don't you think? How that you're not? Can you see any race of people? I don't like to use race because there's only one race, but any ethnic group now enslaving another ethnic group and it being allowed.
What do you mean by enslaving?
Like the type of enslavement that put you in chains and let you work, and if you don't work, can kill you, rape you, sell you as a human being. And I'm not, human trafficking exists, but certainly not to that degree. Or do you think it does?
Well, I would like you to go on. I would like you to do some research on the titanium and mineral mines around Africa and see what sort of labor is being used there.
Yeah.
Is
Tell
that
me if
some?
that doesn't quantify as slavery.
Yeah.
But that kind of broad, man, don't you think?
Not
Well, okay,
really. Not
well, then
really.
I've made my suggestion.
Yeah. No,
Go
not
ahead.
not really.
Go ahead. Yeah,
It
yeah,
still
yeah.
it
You
still
can always
represents
find something of that sort. I mean,
Something,
really.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, you
something.
can. Yes, yes, you can.
We're
Significant.
talking about hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
people,
Yes.
maybe millions of people.
A whole
Yeah.
race of people is what you're saying.
It is.
A
It
whole
is. It
race
is.
of
It is.
people.
It is black people and brown people.
What?
Whether you move from
And
whether
black
you
people in the U.S. and black people in Belize also included.
no,
But
we're
then
not
we're part
talking.
of that race. You cannot say that all of them are there. It happens in isolated areas. There are labor camps, of course. There are sweatshops, etc. But I mean, to define slavery so loosely, then
No,
you're
it's not
moving away.
loose.
You're being
No,
ridiculous because you
it's
can
not.
never tie it down.
No, that's not true. I believe, like he said, like Dr. Young said, there are hundreds and thousands in those African countries that are part of those labor. There are people in some South American and countries that are part of those sort of forced labor.
Labor camps.
There are people in the very Caribbean. There are people that in Haiti that are often said to
But
be
Gregory,
captured and worked in
let me ask you a
camps in
question. Let me ask you: is that the type of slavery you would ask reparation
slavery,
for?
slavery,
Okay,
slavery,
so
slavery.
but is that the type of
No,
slavery that?
the magnitude of it when black people are being trafficked from Africa is different. It's a different proportion, but it still exists. That's the only point I think we were trying to make, Mr. Chairman, is that it
Okay.
exists to some degree, and the world
Yes.
is not free of it, and there's no way we could guarantee those people freedom, much less to guarantee and say that people will never be enslaved again based on race or based on culture
Religion
or
or
based
anything.
on or any of those markers that may define someone to feel superior and more entitled to your labor.
In a systematic way, you're talking about.
It's possible. I wouldn't dismiss it.
I
Everything in slavery have existed throughout time.
I would hope
We
mankind would
probably
not.
have the least of it in this time than we ever had it.
Let
But
me
it
just
doesn't mean that it could not come back.
hold up. It's my hope then that mankind would never step aside, stand aside, and watch this happen ever again. The
Mankind is
magnitude of
standing
slavery.
mankind is standing right now and watching Ukraine being demolished.
You could say that they're watching what now?
The Ukraine being demolished by another country. We're
They
standing.
stood by and watched Rwanda destroy itself.
Yeah. So we can't count on mankind to be so noble. It's strange, but we cannot.
All right. Let's switch topics here for a minute and go local, because I noticed the stevedores at Port of Belize are raising dust again. And what's going on with that? They're almost like the cane farmers. Every year or every so often, it's the same issues over and over. We talk about fix slavery. We can't seem to fix labor. What that is situation here? You think? How can this be remedied? No thoughts on that, huh?
Could you tell us, Mr. Chairman, what is in fact the contention now at the port?
I don't know that they know, because they're saying some agreement is not being adhered to, but both sides have a different story. But what my point is that it comes up every so often. When can't they just come up to an agreement, stick to it, and get this done?
Well, I think every year they have labor renegotiation contracts and stuff, and so it will present itself on a regular cycle.
To the point
Always capital is going to want to pay less for your labor,
and laborers are going to want to
demand more for their labor. So you'll always have that
is there
competition.
Middle ground? Okay. There's no middle ground there then, as you're suggesting, and can't be found.
Well, I think people are feeling the squeeze. I kind of have to think of the stevedores and those people right now. They're feeling the squeeze. The economy is tight. Every time you go to the store, the prices of things goes up tremendously. Is there a way to kind of reduce that squeeze? most people see it as getting more pay. Sometimes that's not the answer. Sometimes it is government doing more to make life more affordable and more comfortable for people. Some of those would be, don't charge me to send my kids to school. Some of them could be subsidy for housing, a lower interest rate to build, government build a house and charge you at a lower interest rate. So there are vehicles to kind of address those, but until they make those effort, I think the people are going to feel the squeeze, and that's the channel they have, is to go and face off with their employer and say, give me more.
Okay. I see the port authority, the union has elected a firebrand, and I'm wondering if he's being too much of a firebrand. And that's just a thought. But I saw another union member, Ruth Schumann, who came under fire after some former disembezzlement case came up, where to the tune of $100,000 or more was embezzled from some entity where she was overseeing, and then she returned and said, "Well, no, I don't want to come in here again," and they have embraced her with open arms. Any thoughts on that? Are you familiar with you haven't seen that story yet? Anybody?
I saw that she resigned, and I saw that she rescinded her resignation. I think she said they were attacking her personally and her family, and that the president of the union did not defend her. I don't know what type of defense, and I don't know what exactly the charges that were made against her. But I think it's okay if she resolved, because that would have been an internal issue, right, between her and whatever her board's members were, to resolve. If she got satisfaction that they address her concerns, then she probably feel comfortable enough to serve as their president or chairman.
No, but there's another side of that. How about the unions then? Given that mark on her character, which is there, she was investigated. I don't know what the outcome of that was.
If she wasn't the person that embezzled the money, I don't hold her much.
But that's maybe, a big if.
Maybe she was the stewardship. She might have had some responsibility to it. I would find that of concern if something happens under a manager's watch, and to see how it happened and what their response was, it could hold them some bit of culpability on it. But if she didn't do it, I don't have much to say on it.
Yeah, but
or to think bad of her. You see what I'm saying?
Sorry.
Do you recall a case, Joe?
The one that you are referring to with the girl Schumann, that is an internal problem. That is not a dispute between employer-employee. The case with the port is different. I think the differences came between the employer and employee. And I don't know if there is a current crisis, a new one. But I knew at the port, one, it had to do with when they decided to move the loading of sugar from the port here in Belize City to the port in Big Creek. That was what created that problem. Right. Then the other problem came up when the time to renew the collective bargaining agreement. That became another issue. But that, again, is issues in the case of moving the contract for the sugar to Big Creek. They thought that they was entitled to compensation. The government interceded and gave them some sort of compensation. In my judgment, for sympathy, you could have given them, but there was no legal right to that.
Yeah.
The government claimed that when they made that change, that they had promised them that they would compensate them. That is not true. That wasn't true. They had never, when they sold the port, there was no such commitment. So again, what happened there is that the government, in trying to appease the union for what they were claiming that they had a right to, the government gave them the money. Then the port interceded to try to see how they could have blocked the money. And the grounds that the union was not entitled to receive public funds the way they did. So when we talk about what is happening at the port, The only one I could recall last was the collective bargaining agreement. The issue that you are referring to with that union, that's an internal matter.
Interesting. All right, let's go back to the USA. Is the US gonna default on their
They have never default. I don't think they will.
they haven't yet.
They have
Yeah,
never done it.
but
I
it
don't think
seems
they will. It would create so much issues for them. I don't think they will. I think they'll play topsy at the very end, and then they'll do a little short thing, and then they'll do another short one, and they will in time resolve it. I think this Republican gang is a little bit more noisier and more to the right and fascist than the previous ones that presidents had to deal with. But I think that in the end, the wiser heads will make the proper decision, because it would be a great cost to the interest rate that the U.S. would have to pay on loans if they were to default and their rating get degraded.
But there seems to be some egos at play here.
Yeah, but yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
It seems the Democrats are saying, well, the Republicans are saying we will support the raising of the ceiling debt, but you have to make some spending cuts.
Yes.
And the Democrats are saying, well, we want you to support us raising the ceiling debt without any commitment to cut spending.
Yeah.
How do you see that? Don't you see that as being a bit?
I think they will. I think the Democrats will give back something. They have billions of dollars in COVID funds that was allocated that haven't been used, and they don't seem a need for that money or that much of that money any longer. And so, and there are other programs that in every program there's waste and stuff. The president could do his solar program, he could do his EV program and all those things, and take a few $1 billion out. And I think that's what will end up happening to kind of appease and give Republicans something to say they got something. But it will not be in the value that the Republican wants. It will be something, a token, and they will, I believe, come along and sign, and things will move on and go on until near election time next year. So it will go on for another year. I think they said by end of June we are going to be approaching our ceiling for default, and so they'll probably flaunt with that timing. It could change based on what debt is being incurred. It could be June, it could be July, it could be August. So as long as they don't reach that final date where we're spending more, where it's exceeding what has been allocated, then they'll be okay. Just in time, I think they will make the change and make the adjustments so that we don't get over the limit.
But Chairman, I believe quite frankly that the Republicans in this particular case are just being too darn partisan and disruptive. It has been the tradition and it has been the practice that the debt ceiling is set for the purpose that the Treasury never has to go back for additional spending because it is already covered by the debt ceiling. Every budget, U.S. government, as it is in Belize, that your spending exceeds the revenue, but the deficit is made up from borrowing. In the United States, the debt ceiling is set. Under Trump, there were three, and there were 4 qualms about it.
Hold on, Joe. Dr. Young, can I ask you to mute your mic until you're ready to speak? Because there's a sound coming from there.
It's not coming from me. I have nothing on here.
Okay, because I know you had muted it before and it had stopped. So I
have not changed my settings since things started.
All right, go ahead, Joe. Stop now, though. It stopped.
Yeah, so what they have been doing ever since is that they set up that ceiling. They knew that the budget has been passed already or will be passed. But what they do is to avoid the government has to come back, or the Congress to come back to ask for more money, because they have it within the debt. What Belize do to compare is that we use what you call a supplementary, that we have to go back to Parliament. In this case, they don't, because they set the debt ceiling. And I'm saying in the case of Trump, 3 times they set the debt ceiling under a Republican government. Now, the Republicans are demanding a debt ceiling, but the condition is that they must cut spending. The spending that they are asking to cut are some of the signature programs of the Biden administration. And that is why the Democrats is holding out. Why do you want us to cut out spending on some of our programs? Medicare, the relief of debt for students, the Social Security, and about 5 or 6 of them, I think. So to me, I think the Republicans are in fact trying to hold the Democrats to ransom. But I don't believe that there will be a default. They have until June the 1st. And like Mr. Kramer said, I don't think there will be a default. And they have already quantified, the experts have already quantified, if there is a default, how damaging it would be. They are showing you unemployment can go up to 8%.
How would Belize be affected?
Well, how can Belize be affected? One, Belize is highly vulnerable to external shocks because, one, we depend a lot on tourism. 40% of the GDP comes from tourism. The majority of the tourists come from the United States. If you're defaulting on the debt triggers a recession, evidently, Belize will be affected. A good amount of our commodities, raw materials, we export to the United States, highly volatile on the market. Therefore, if there is a recession in America, given the vulnerability of the structure of our economy, it could affect us. Tourism and the raw materials, the products that we export.
Would you say could or definitely would?
Huh?
Would you say would or definitely would?
It would, because a default on the debt is very likely that it will trigger a recession.
Right.
And when it does that, what happens in the recession? People cut back. And when they cut back, when they begin to cut back on luxuries, traveling, they don't go as much to the restaurants, they don't visit the beauty parlors as much. But it affects Belize because 40% of the GDP is coming from tourism.
Yeah, I agree.
In January this year, just to emphasize it, the storm in the United States in January affected the occupancy rate in some cases of our hotels by 10%. And that was just a storm, a natural storm. So that is how it can affect us. But I don't think there will be a default. I agree with Mr. Morris.
Speaking of Republicans and Democrats, I see Trump went back to court and lost. Was the girl that brought the charge against him was given $5 million. Did you think that was a fair judgment? Were you happy with the outcome?
You're asking me?
Yes. How you see it?
Well, I left it to the court. The court made the decision. The jury. But
again, too, this something happened 20 years ago. For his defense, he's saying he never met the girl. I mean, not saying that he wouldn't lie. He's been known to lie. But how does a court prove something happened 20 years ago between two people, with one saying it did and the other say it didn't? Where's the proof?
The serial war reparation, the things that happened maybe 100 years ago.
No, but we knew that happened. We're sure that happened.
Yeah, but you cannot. All right. Does the time status bar a charge like that? Again, I mean, the lawyers are more able to.
Yeah, well, none of the time was status bar.
Well, if it wasn't status bar, then you have a right to go to court.
Yes, you have a right to go to court, but
yes,
the court has a right to render justice. Was that justice, in your opinion?
No, I am not questioning the court decision because I have no reason, I have no evidence. I cannot just do it simply by emotions or by any gender prejudice. No, that was the law. And they interpreted the law, and they came to the conclusion that based on the evidence on the law, that he was guilty. Now, who am I now to tell your boy 20 years ago, I mean, how the man or how they could have remembered that? It's not for me to make those judgments. I don't think that is something for us to even discuss. Unless anybody have reason to believe that the court was unjust.
I don't know. It sets a precedent, really, because anybody now could come up and make an accusation like that and say, well, I told two people about it because this, as far as I understand, was evidence that existed.
Yet they have the right to appeal. So appeal. I take it that they have the right to appeal.
Yeah, well, that's not. I hear you. Greg, any opinion on that? Greg, your mic, your mute.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I don't have any opinion on the court case. It seems to me that the jurors made a decision based on what they understand of the law and how they felt about the evidence that was presented to them, and I'm fine with it. He said he'll appeal, and if he appeals, then he gets to retry, or if another court says he could go ahead with the appeal, if they find it valid, the reasons for it, then they could overrule it, or they have another trial, or whatever it is. I have really no understanding of that type of
Yeah, I
thing.
think you know what, that the conventional way of looking at things now is that Trump is hated. Let's and it's by his fault. He deserves to be hated, I would think. But I think that we could put aside that sometimes and look at the merits of particular incidents, and from what we're seeing as opposed to who we're seeing, which is Trump. And yes, Trump is bad, and I don't think it's a witch hunt as such. But then sometimes you have to wonder, could it really be?
But if somebody got harm, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think you are making a serious mistake here.
Uh-huh.
Because you are drawing an inference as if though that was what happened. That's not what happened. You have no evidence to say that was what happened.
What am I saying happened?
Repeat what you said just now about what you believe happened, and you will sense that there is no evidence to support what you said.
But no. What did you interpret me as saying happened?
You seem to be interpreting it as if though they made a mistake.
I know. I say no such thing. I was just.
All right, sorry then. I will withdraw my.
Yeah. No, I don't know whether a mistake was made or not. I gave an opinion of the fact that something that happened 20 years ago. Well, I would think, first of all, it would be difficult.
But time doesn't change. Time doesn't change a wrong or a good, right? It doesn't change it. And if people believe that it happened, if the jurors believe the evidence presented to them, the time doesn't have an effect of the fact that a wrong was done. That's how I see it. So
I was right. You are quite right, Mr. Morrison. I think what you said, Mr. Chairman, to me, you can draw the inference for it that there was a time constraint. In other words, the time did not allow them to get justice, did not allow justice. And that shouldn't be said because there is no evidence to support that time would have affected the decision.
Okay.
The inference, I'm just saying it out of goodwill.
Yeah. I just find that it sets a bad precedent, because if you,
I don't think it does. I don't think it does.
Yeah.
I don't think time. You know, it's like some of what we're seeing in some of the cases with the priests in the Catholic Church, and they kind of reverse the fact that you could present that evidence if you are a child and you're 30 years old now, you could still bring up that evidence. I don't think time has an effect on what was wrong if you could prove that this happened.
But my question is, how do you prove something like that? You were in a
it's just by belief, right? All the time, most of the cases are won by whether a jury believe a certain party versus another. Not all the time. Not all the time. Well, evidence help prove it, but evidence is not the only issue. We have seen many times where evidence is not the main issue. It's how the belief system of the juries rule that verdict.
But is that fair, Gregory?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I think we need the input of a lawyer here. Don't tell me that evidence is not an issue. How can you just use the law and come to a decision without evidence? No.
I'm not. That's not quite what I meant.
That's not what I think. I thought you said just so that the evidence is not the issue.
No. I said that, but that's not exactly how I meant it. That the evidence doesn't.
The evidence was okay. The evidence was good enough. Good.
Yes, yes,
All right,
yes.
good. I thought you
Yes.
mean that the evidence
Yeah,
was
no
relevant.
evidence is, but I think there was no physical evidence. There isn't a picture. There isn't someone to come up and say, yes, I saw when he stick his finger down her dress or whatever, things like that. That type of evidence does not exist. But her presenting it is the evidence that convinced the juror that the wrong was done. The physical evidence did not exist, and that's what I was kind of referring to.
Do you think if it was somebody else other than Trump, that evidence might have been viewed as weaker than it was, given that it was Trump?
I think because the pattern of what have been said about him, the pattern of what he have said himself about his actions, I think those were the kind of evidence that was used. So I don't think it was on. I don't know whether it was fair or unfair, but I don't think that. I think the juror made a decision based on what their belief was about what happened.
But
Yeah.
then, Mr. Morrison, you don't make me know if what you are saying I will agree with you, then I'll have to agree with the chairman.
What?
Because what you said just now, if I
Mhm.
wish you could repeat it.
As being evidence, the evidence that he presented.
The evidence that she presented. I said
Right,
the evidence that
right,
she
right.
presented that he did what she did. That's the evidence that the jurors used. That's how they came to
But
their
what you
conclusion.
said just now that I think you said that because of Trump's known past, that could have influenced them to
Oh,
believe.
of course, that
But if it was done,
is part
then
of it.
really, I agree with the chairman.
That's
Then
not
that was not
legal.
justice.
Why is
You
that not justice?
Because if you want to use my past wrong for what I did, I know here I am before a court allegedly have committed a wrong. You have to go by the evidence for that case before the court. You can't go back to no. I'm not suggesting that in humans we are not prejudiced and biased. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it would be unfair for me to look at something that you did 10, 15 years ago. You were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And now I find out that you did wrong. I know you're here before this court. And I will use what you did then to make me believe that the evidence against you is true.
No, but if you lied to me before and then you come to me and tell me you're not lying, that is evidence for me that you have the potential to lie. So I'm using that same transfer of logic.
I think
Yeah,
you know, because I am not sufficiently knowledgeable in the law to that extent. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know if I was a jury, I don't see why I can simply say that, boy, you know something. And
So
you have a tendency to do
you
this.
hold a person's character to say because he have done it in the past, he could do it again. That's
I
character.
don't know if that's legal.
character.
I don't know if you can legally do
all
that.
right, the alligator gone. And the dog gone. Then they left alligator gone with them. Because alligator like go with dog.
Exactly.
And
That's basically it, you know. That's basically it.
if I was a juror, somehow I feel like I have not. I have
Maybe Dr. Young could weigh in. He have 5
haven't
minutes.
got the evidence before me on this particular case. But I think Mr. Young is right. We are really making a lot of time spent on something that
But that's why I didn't want to touch this because I know nothing about it.
Listen.
I think it's going down a wrong way, the wrong pathway.
We're winding down.
All right.
It is Mother's Day. I want to say, and I also saw that Bella Karib passed away.
Yes.
Belizean icon.
Yes,
So we must offer condolences to the family. You know Joe, you knew her songs. You're familiar with her, right?
I'm trying to. Could you refresh my memory there, Mr. Chairman?
Rice and Beans, nice. Something like that.
Okay.
Did she also sing Who Said Belize No Got No Culture?
But
Something
that
like
was
that.
in the Gulf
No, I
War.
don't remember if she sang that one. I remember Leah Vernon sang.
Leah Vernon sang that.
No, I think Bella Karib did sing one of that. Who Said Belize No Got No Culture? Yeah, that was Bella Karib.
That was
But
Bella
anyway,
Karib?
she did a number of Belizean songs, and she was well known.
Yes.
And so we offer condolences, no? And again, Mother's Day, all the mothers in the house, all the persons who still have their mothers are blessed to still have their mothers. Mine is gone to higher service. I know Dr. Young's is gone. Yours, Joe,
Yeah, my mother is died. Yeah, I'm right.
Greg, is your mother still around?
No, my mom's been gone since 1999, I think, something like that.
Okay,
It's
well,
been a
most of
while.
us know mothers that are still out there, and we want to say Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. We know that it's celebrated on Sunday, and in fact, the biggest argument it seemed out there on social media was whether that today or Sunday. I know the official date is made the 10th every year, so on Sunday officially is celebrated the second Sunday in May, and we need to just wish all mothers out there Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah.
We
I
are we're
remember when I was a little kid, the pits right off, I think they're on Nursey Street, and we lived on Kelly Street. And every Mother's Day, they used to have one of the biggest Mother's Day dance. And I remember, oh, you can't, that's the only time I see a lot of cars on that street growing up as a kid, because all the cars come and park in front of our house. And there was a big party going on until like 12, 1 o'clock at night. And we used to just go out and walk and see till my mom called us home at like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock and just watch all the
she
going
had
on.
a big family obviously then, no?
Yeah, they did. Well, they had it where they invited people from the community. It was a big
Celebration.
to do. Yeah, it was a big
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do. Yeah.
Wonderful. Let me thank Dr. Young for joining us tonight. He has exited without saying goodbye,
Oh,
but that's all right. We I think we covered a few issues that were of interest. Any guys had anything else that you wanted to place on the agenda as such, which might
well,
have
the
been
only thing I wanted to talk about, one of the things we had, the prime minister was talking about was investors for bamboo farming and things like that. And I always appreciate people that makes investment in Belize and so forth. But I was I have little concern about bamboo as a type of plant that's very pervasive, and sometimes it takes over and kind of have real ecological issues because of because of this pervasiveness and because of the amount of water it consumes and how it may impact the overall ecology. So that's something I would like to talk about next time a little bit.
Might he be talking though about the existing bamboos that are there and are out
No, he
there
was talking about him
farming it
meeting today with some investors for
for
bamboo
farming?
farming. So,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and I'm sure that we have enough agriculturists and people like that could bring these kind of things forward. But it's one of my concern in trying to balance and trying to make sure that sometimes we going into something with a knowledge and with a forethought and making sure that we are making the proper moves, and not just every dollar that shows up is a necessarily good dollar
Yeah.
in the long
That
term.
that's a point for another show for real. Dr. Young, any closing words? Thank you very much for coming on, sir, and joining us tonight. We appreciate it. We're honored.
I'd just like to encourage people to take seriously constitutional reform, and their concerns are real, or concerns are real, and this is a prime opportunity where we have a mandate, or a government that has given an enabling act to a group to start the process, that we should participate. Take it very seriously, seize the day, and let's try and find a way forward for a better Belize, governance of a better Belize.
Are you convinced there's no hidden agenda?
I don't care to comment about that. I don't think that's important for me. I'm a political scientist. If they ask me anything, I'm willing to contribute. I'll let the politicians deal with that.
I see. All right. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Fellas, next week, same time, same place. CY, take it away. CY, asleep at the wheel here. Let's go, CY. Thanks, fellas, for another interesting show. Have a nice evening.
Bye bye.
Ballistic Recordings in the building. Not only destination, but the journey. The fight is the system. From early. That's what they up on a journey. My story, not his story. Alright then. My story. Again. My days was numbered and dark when the ship from Africa disembark. I jump overboard, swim with the shark, then that them bite much worse than embark. My days was numbered and dark when the ship from Africa disembark. I jump overboard and swim with the shark, then that them bite much worse than embark. They tried to commit me to slavery, use me as human machinery. They did not expect such bravery. Go with dreadlocks, then think me crazy. My grandmother, her name is Daisy. Say young man, no make nothing fees me. Smoke me Buddha, watch me eye easy. We don't work a Yankee dollar, then think we lazy. My days was numbered and dark when the ship from Africa disembark. I jump overboard, swim with the shark, then that them bite much worse than embark. My days was numbered and dark when the ship from Africa disembark. I jump overboard and swim with the shark, then that them bite much worse than embark. Have me standing in a welfare line, cause I am black, feel me no mankind. Move the chains from my feet, put it round me mind. Cheated me like I committed a crime, but I know it was only a matter of time before I get paid in full for my rhyme. Even though it was a tedious climb, held on to mine like a grape to a vine. Ballistic Recordings in the building. Not only destination, but the journey. The fight is the system. From early. That's what they up on a journey. My story, not his story. Alright then. My story. Again. My days was numbered and dark when the ship from Africa disembark. I jump overboard, swim with the shark, then that them bite much worse than embark. My days was numbered and dark when the ship from Africa disembark. I jump overboard and swim with the shark, then that them bite much worse than embark. They tried to commit me to slavery, use me as human machinery. They did not expect such bravery. Go with dreadlocks, then think me crazy. My grandmother, her name is Daisy. Say young man, no make nothing fees me. Smoke me Buddha, watch me eye easy. We don't work a Yankee dollar, then think we lazy. My days was numbered and dark when the ship from Africa disembark. I jump overboard, swim with the shark, then that them bite much worse than embark. My days was numbered and dark when the ship from Africa disembark. I jump overboard and swim with the shark, then that them bite much worse than embark. Have me standing in a welfare line.
Shout out to Ghetto Swag Radio. This your boy Young Magic. I'm stunning, boy. I'm a stunner, boy. I'm switching lanes, flying through. Call me Wonder Boy. I'm Flea, boy. I'm a D, boy. Got the glow, you could call me Bruce Leroy. I hopped out, some cherry shit. Show your titties like you doing it for Jerry, bitch. I pimp hard, lean in my cup. In the sand, getting dubs from a bubble butt. I was on one, now I'm on two. I'm rolling, man. Life is beautiful. I'm stone cold, call me Austin. I'm busy chasing money and flossing. I'm ballin'. My 10's clean, moonwalking on the track, call me Billie Jean. It's regular, the summer's mine. I'ma transform like the 14th prime. Shout out to Ghetto Swag Radio. This your boy Young Magic. I'm stunning, boy. I'm a stunner, boy. I'm switching lanes, flying through, call me Wonder Boy. I'm Fleet, boy. I'm a D, boy. Got the glow, you could call me Bruce Lee, Roy. I hopped out, some cherry shit. Show your titties like you doing it for Jerry, bitch. I pimp hard, lean in my cup. In the sand, getting dubs from a bubble butt. I was on one, now I'm on two. I'm rolling, man.
I know we could do better. I know we could do better. Small X, fall victory. Walk away from trouble. That is a victory. Ceasefire, who no picnic. Put down the guns and land on the ABC. What's going on? You just pull that trigger. What's going on? You're excited to kill another brother. Bop, 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 bop. Another shot boss. Another youth murder. Bop, 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 bop. Tears running from the eyes of another mother. No bad man there. No bad man there. No bad man. No bad man there. You will get burned when you mess with fire. No bad man there. No bad man. No bad man there. No bad man. No bad man there. Be a leader, not a follower. My opinions, our generation mess up the young kids them. They don't have no respect. Mommy and daddy store with the bell from them. No lesson learned. Them all sell out them goddamn friends. And anything that isn't trend, they will follow that right up to the end. It gets worse when them take God. Hey, out of the school. And all them politicians think they could take what we fool. Life means nothing to others now. Human just cruel. And everybody in power. Hey, take poor people from you. Your time is ticking. Tick, 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 tick. Like a time bomb. Tick, 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 tick. One day I mess with the wrong one. Then tick, 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 tick. Put down the guns. Then no tick, 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 tick. What's going on? You just pull that trigger. What's going on? You're excited to kill another brother. Bop, 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 bop. Another shot post. Another youth murder. Bop, 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 bop. Tears running from the eyes of another mother. No bad man there. No bad man there. No bad man. No bad man there. You will get burned when you mess with fire. No bad man there. No bad man. No bad man there. No bad man. No bad man there. Be a leader, not a follower. Me singing for the youth. Apex predator, so treat me like a barracuda from outer Belize water, or like a polar bear from outer Alaska. If I'm a snake, then call me a black mamba. Apex predator, so treat me like a barracuda from outer Belize water, or like a polar bear from outer Alaska. If I'm a snake, black mamba. Right now we sit down on top of the food chain, over vast territory, and I'm mandarin. Serengeti, one of my domain. If you don't find no bones, then we take the blame. Concrete jungle, rugged terrain. Look at the color and the size of my mane. We no play close, much less play games. We not do this for likes nor fame. I've had the disposition of a bald eagle. Miles above earth we don't set the table. Spook your herd, watch you scramble. Pick off the weak and the vulnerable.
one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. CY the hammer with one hammer. Try fi do the same. The favorite hammer na the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer na the sledgehammer. Not try fi do the same. Some man want hammer with 2 hammer, 3 hammer, 4 hammer. Some man even hammer with 5 hammer. Them boy they insane. Next thing you know, baby drummer with baby mama, baby drummer. Next thing you know, baby drummer. No bother call me name. School where me gone that Ebenezer, Ebenezer, Ebenezer. School where me gone that Ebenezer. Them teach me for use me brain. So when me hold a mic, me blow fire, blow fire, blow fire. When me hold a mic, me blow fire. This is not a game. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer na the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer na the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. And to Jaja, all the power, all the power, all the power. And to Jaja, all the power. That he they keep me sane. If one black man they suffer, 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 suffer. If one black man they suffer, suffer. All a wifi blame. Now watch how the lyrics get hotter, 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 hotter. Watch how the lyrics get hotter, hotter. Spit in flame. Keep it smooth like butter, 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 butter. Keep it smooth like butter, butter. Drop tune like rain. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. My favorite hammer na the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. My favorite hammer na the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Lot of people them a follow a Lara, follow a Lara, follow a Lara. Lot of people them a follow a Lara. Sell their soul for fame. Whole heap of them a killer, 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 killer. Whole heap of them a killer, killer. Till their shirt get stained. They only know about pleasure, 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 pleasure. They only know about pleasure, pleasure. They don't know about pain. Wheel on like feather, 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 feather. Wheel on like feather, feather. Better hold a lane. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. My favorite hammer na the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. My favorite hammer na the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Girl them a move like salt shaker, salt shaker, salt shaker. Girl them a move like salt shaker. Simple and plain. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, 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 Peter. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, Peter. If you mix with Jane, streets of New York, soldier, 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 soldier. Streets of New York, soldier, soldier. Things don't change. In a time, new world order, new world order, new world order. In a time, new world order. Never be the same. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer na the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer na the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer na the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer na the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, not try fit to the same. Some man want hammer with 2 hammer, 3 hammer, 4 hammer, some man even hammer with 5 hammer. Them boy they insane. Next thing you know, baby drama with baby mama, baby drama. Next thing you know, baby drama, no bother call me name. School where me gone that Ebenezer, Ebenezer, Ebenezer. School where me gone that Ebenezer. Them teach me for use me brain. So when me hold the mic, me blow fire, blow fire, blow fire. When me hold the mic, me blow fire. This is not a game. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. And to Jaja, all the power, all the power, all the power. And to Jaja, all the power. That he they keep me sane. If one black man they suffer, 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 suffer. If one black man they suffer, suffer. All are wiffy. Blame. Now watch how the lyrics get hotter, 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 hotter. Watch how the lyrics get hotter, hotter. Spit in flames. Keep it smooth like butter, 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 butter. Keep it smooth like butter, butter. Drop tune like rain. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. My favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. My favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Lot of people them a follow a Lara, follow a Lara, follow a Lara. Lot of people them a follow a Lara. Sell their soul for fame. Whole heap of them a killer, 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 killer. Whole heap of them a killer, killer. Till their shirt get stained. They only know about pleasure, 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 pleasure. They only know about pleasure, pleasure. They don't know about pain. Lead on like feather, 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 feather. Lead on like feather, feather. Better hold a lane. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. My favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. My favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Girl, them a move like salt shaker, salt shaker, salt shaker. Girl, them a move like salt shaker. Simple and plain. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, 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 Peter. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, Peter. If you mix with Jane, streets of New York, soldier, 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 soldier. Streets of New York, soldier, soldier. Things don't change. In any time, new world order, new world order, new world order. In any time, new world order. Never be the same. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, not try fi do the same. Some man want hammer with 2 hammer, 3 hammer, 4 hammer, some man even hammer with 5 hammer. Them boy they insane. Next thing you know, baby drama with baby mama, baby drama. Next thing you know, baby drama, no bother call me name. School where me gone that a Ebenezer, Ebenezer, Ebenezer. School where me gone that a Ebenezer. Them teach me for use me brain. So when me hold a mic, me blow fire, blow fire, blow fire. When me hold a mic, me blow fire. This is not a game. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. And to Jaja, all the power, all the power, all the power. And to Jaja, all the power. That he they keep me sane. If one black man they suffer, 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 suffer. If one black man they suffer, suffer. All are wiffy. Blame. Now watch how the lyrics get hotter, 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 hotter. Watch how the lyrics get hotter, hotter. Spit in flames. Keep it smooth like butter, 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 butter. Keep it smooth like butter, butter. Drop tune like rain. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Lot of people them a follow a Lara, follow a Lara, follow a Lara. Lot of people them a follow a Lara. Sell their soul for fame. Whole heap of them a killer, 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 killer. Whole heap of them a killer, killer. Till their shirt get stained. They only know about pleasure, 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 pleasure. They only know about pleasure, pleasure. They don't know about pain. Feel on like feather, 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 feather. Feel on like feather, feather. Better hold a lane. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Girl, them a move like salt shaker, salt shaker, salt shaker. Girl, them a move like salt shaker. Simple and plain. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, 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 Peter. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, Peter. If you mix with Jane, streets of New York, soldier, 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 soldier. Streets of New York, soldier, soldier. Things don't change. In a time, new world order, new world order, new world order. In a time, new world order. Never be the same. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. favorite hammer and the sledgehammer, not try fit do the same. Some man want hammer with 2 hammer, 3 hammer, 4 hammer, some man even hammer with 5 hammer. Them boy they insane. Next thing you know, baby drama with baby mama, baby drama. Next thing you know, baby drama, no bother call me name. School where me gone that Ebenezer, Ebenezer, Ebenezer. School where me gone that Ebenezer. Them teach me for use me brain. So when me hold the mic, me blow fire, blow fire, blow fire. When me hold the mic, me blow fire. This is not a game. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if you do the same. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer. Not try if you do the same. And to Jaja, all the power, all the power, all the power. And to Jaja, all the power. That he they keep me sane. If one black man they suffer, 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 suffer. If one black man they suffer, suffer. All are wiffy. Blame. Now watch how the lyrics get hotter, 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 hotter. Watch how the lyrics get hotter, hotter. Spit in flames. Keep it smooth like butter, 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 butter. Keep it smooth like butter, butter. Drop tune like rain. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Lot of people them a follow a Lara, follow a Lara, follow a Lara. Lot of people them a follow a Lara. Sell their soul for fame. Whole heap of them a killer, 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 killer. Whole heap of them a killer, killer. Till their shirt get stained. They only know about pleasure, 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 pleasure. They only know about pleasure, pleasure. They don't know about pain. Wheel on like feather, 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 feather. Wheel on like feather, feather. Better hold a lane. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Girl, them a move like salt shaker, salt shaker, salt shaker. Girl, them a move like salt shaker. Simple and plain. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, 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 Peter. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, Peter. If you mix with Jane, streets of New York, soldier, 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 soldier. Streets of New York, soldier, soldier. Things don't change. In a time, new world order, new world order, new world order. In a time, new world order. Never be the same. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. See why the hammer with 1 hammer, 1 hammer, 1 hammer. See why the hammer with 1 hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer. Sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Some man want hammer with two hammer. 3 hammer, 4 hammer, some man even hammer with 5 hammer. Them boy they insane. Next thing you know, baby drama with baby mama, baby drama. Next thing you know, baby drama, no bother call me name. School where me gone that a Ebenezer, Ebenezer, Ebenezer. School where me gone that a Ebenezer. Them teach me for use me brain. So when me hold a mic, me blow fire, blow fire, blow fire. When me hold a mic, me blow fire. This is not a game. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. And to Jaja, all the power, all the power, all the power. And to Jaja, all the power. That he they keep me sane. If one black man they suffer, 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 suffer. If one black man they suffer, suffer. All are wiffy. Blame. Now watch how the lyrics get hotter, 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 hotter. Watch how the lyrics get hotter, hotter. Spit in flames. Keep it smooth like butter, 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 butter. Keep it smooth like butter, butter. Drop tune like rain. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. My favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. My favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Lot of people them a follow a Lara, follow a Lara, follow a Lara. Lot of people them a follow a Lara. Sell their soul for fame. Whole heap of them a killer, 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 killer. Whole heap of them a killer, killer. Till their shirt get stained. They only know about pleasure, 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 pleasure. They only know about pleasure, pleasure. They don't know about pain. Feel on like feather, 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 feather. Feel on like feather, feather. Better hold a lane. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. My favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. My favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. Girl, them a move like salt shaker, salt shaker, salt shaker. Girl, them a move like salt shaker. Simple and plain. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, 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 Peter. Tarzan of a mix with Peter, Peter. If you mix with Jane, streets of New York, soldier, 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 soldier. Streets of New York, soldier, soldier. Things don't change. In any time, new world order, new world order, new world order. In any time, new world order. Never be the same. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the same. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the same. why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if we do the team. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer that is sledgehammer. Not try if we do the team. Some man want hammer with 2 hammer, 3 hammer, 4 hammer. Some man even hammer with 5 hammer. Them boy they in Scene. Next thing you know, baby drama with baby mama. Baby drama. Next thing you know, baby drama. No bother call me name. School where me gone that Ebenezer. Ebenezer, Ebenezer. School where me gone that Ebenezer. Them teach me for use me brain. So when me hold a mic, me blow fire, blow fire, blow fire. When me hold a mic, me blow fire. This is not a game. See why the hammer with one hammer, one hammer, one hammer. See why the hammer with one hammer. Try if it do the same. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer, sledgehammer, sledgehammer. The favorite hammer and the sledgehammer. Not try if it do the same. And to Jaja, all the power, all the power, all the power. And to Jaja, all the power. That he they keep me sane. If one black man they suffer, 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 suffer. If one black man they suffer, suffer.